Now, with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad making a big splash in New York this week for the UN General Assembly, conversation, of course, has turned to Iran as a nuclear threat. But perhaps the question that we really need to ask is whether Iran is a threat at all. Ahmadinejad said that he's ready to sit down and talk if the stakes are fair. But can they be fair when U.S. politicians, former officials, have already made up their minds, with the likes of John Bolton and Newt Gingrich calling for attacks on the regular? Now, Iran is by no means a cooperative player on the world stage, but is it fair to make them the very center of discussion? Could they perhaps be a distraction from other problems in the Middle East, including the U.S. relationship with both Israel and Saudi Arabia, which for some reason have become taboo topics? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss it is attorney Jordan Sekulow, the Director of International Operations for the American Center for Law and Justice. And from our LA studio, Scott Horton, host of Anti-War Radio and the assistant editor at antiwar.com. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for being here. Now, Jordan, I'm going to start with you. Is Iran a threat? Tell me why they are.
I do think Iran is a threat to the Middle East, to many of our allies, not just Israel, but also Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states.
But to the U.S. as well?
I think to the United States as well, because of our troops in Iraq and throughout the Middle East. We've got a base, an Air Force base in Saudi Arabia. And what Iran has said is that even if Israel attacked unilaterally, in that hypothetical situation, that they would see it as an attack also on the United States, even if we had nothing to do with it, and would hit back at us. And I think hitting back at us means hitting our troops. We have over 100,000 troops stationed right there as basically sitting duck targets for that kind of attack. They're not there, in response to that kind of regime. Now,
Scott, I want to get your opinion on this because, like I said, there's a lot of talk about how dangerous Iran is, especially if Iran becomes a nuclear threat. But in the meantime, I mean, Iran's military really is minuscule compared to ours, and you could say we could easily blow them off the face of the earth with our nuclear power. So would Iran ever risk attacking the U.S. or Israel?
No, I don't think so. And the recent Jeffrey Goldberg piece in The Atlantic portrayed Benjamin Netanyahu and Ehud Barak, both the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister of Israel, as not actually concerned that Iran is an existential threat to Israel, not concerned that even if they did have nuclear weapons, that they would launch some sort of first strike. Netanyahu said that he was concerned that Hezbollah might be emboldened, that word that we remember so well from the Bush years, and Ehud Barak fretted that perhaps there would be a brain drain, he called it, of talented Israelis who might want to move to the United States to live instead of Israel. This is the existential threat to Israel that American boys are supposed to die in another war for. And your other guest is absolutely correct that we have 50,000 combat forces in Iraq right now, along with 100,000 or so contractors, some of them mercenaries, some not, all of them within range of Iranian retaliation. And when it comes to an Israeli unilateral attack, the Iranians, I think correctly, as well as probably anyone in the rest of the world, perceive that there is no such thing as a unilateral Israeli attack. Those are American F-16s.
I would say
that's American-bought fuel in those F-16s tanks. Those are American tax dollars that paid for the bombs hanging under their wings.
We also support a lot of regimes.
Obama actually publicly said that he had a discussion with Benjamin Netanyahu that we will not have any surprises here, and that if there's an Israeli attack on Iran, it will be with his consent and cooperation.
Of course there would not be a surprise. I don't think
anyone would expect the Iranians to just sit there and take it and not defend themselves. Is ridiculous.
And I think there's two mixing two issues. First, Israel could not unilaterally attack Iran in that mindset. They could be the only military force involved, but the U.S. would have to be notified, as well as Saudi Arabia. And there's already been reports in Middle Eastern media that Saudi Arabia is fine with this kind of attack. They don't want Iran either. The second thing is we're not sure how...
Of course Saudi Arabia is fine with this kind of attack because the U.S. just made a big weapons deal with Saudi Arabia as well.
This does not have to be an attack on the Iranian people if it came to that. I don't want it to. I hope what the United States does and other world powers take more of a stance.
What is the grounds for attacking? Just tell me what the point is of starting another war, of more violence, of attacking somebody.
Sure. Unlike what happened in Iraq with the weapons of mass destruction, we know that
didn't actually end up existing. So how do we know if Iran's uranium enrichment program also is a threat?
Let me say this. In Israel, and we have an office there, and we work with a lot of Israeli government officials, they don't want to go to war with Iran. No one wants to do that in Israel. And I agree with Scott. that's not a good idea for anyone. It's caused a lot of human life lost. This is not a 2-day strike, a 6-day war scenario. It's not like that. But we know they have a nuclear program. We know that they keep impeding the IAEA inspectors. As long as they won't let that program go on, it raises everyone's suspicion when their leader then comes and says, Netanyahu's a killer, we should wipe Israel off the face of the map, and he doesn't even say Israel, he says Zionist. It is very troubling, and I do believe, in my hope of hearts, and I work with Iranian dissidents inside Iran, is that we can do more to help them, that there's an opposition movement that I don't want to have to attack, that Israel doesn't want to attack, that the Iranian people don't stand up for this regime. They've tried to fight back. He's got a hold. It's an economic interest for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They have a small army, but let's not forget 125,000 Iranian Revolutionary Guard members who are economically, this means something to them. They don't want to lose the regime because of the money they make off this. And I think that's different.
But let me ask you another question, too. Scott, I mean, let's think about it. There is, of course, an opposition within Iran. But every time that, let's say, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad comes onto the world stage, when he comes to the UN, and all of a sudden everyone starts attacking, you know, like vultures, then doesn't that somehow unite the people back in Iran, unite perhaps the opposing parties again when they become the global scapegoat?
Of course. You know, last time we had an aggressive war against a country based on a nuclear weapons program that didn't exist, we empowered Iran. We've handed the entire nation, at least from Baghdad to Basra, over to the Ayatollah Sistani and Muqtada al-Sadr, who right now lives in Tehran. That entire war, we reversed Reagan's policy and imported the Iranian Revolution into Iraq. And if we bomb Iran, we're going to do the same thing, empower the Iranian regime. It's not just, I mean, if we drop bombs on them, that's the ultimate. But just look back to 2005 when George Bush lectured the Iranian people on TV and said, in July of 2005, he said, do not vote for the right-winger. And the people of Iran came out and they elected Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in the first place.
But what do we know?
Of course,
we know this regime
the Ayatollah and his
survive.
entire regime would love to pretend that every dissident in Iran works for this guy, works for the CIA in order to delegitimize them. The worst thing that we can do is try to help dissidents there.
No,
by
that's
the way,
not true.
the dissidents that the United States helps in Iran are PJAC, communist terrorists,
it doesn't
the
have to just be the
Mujahideen
United States.
al-Khalq,
No,
communist terrorists, and Jandala, who are
the United States government should not be the only party involved in
terrorists. That's who we support inside Iran against the regime there. That's not going to weaken the Ayatollah.
First of all, this regime is not popular. Second of all, they cannot survive with real sanctions economically.
Okay, but let me just ask you this. I mean, sanctions haven't worked before. This is the 4th round. Let's see if they make any difference. But
I think they already are.
The point I was trying to get to at the very beginning is that, okay, Iran is one issue, but to make Iran the center of all discussion and act like that they are the only reason why the U.S. might feel like they're threatened, you know, it ignores other issues like our relationship with Israel in the Middle East. It ignores perhaps the fact that we just made a nice little weapons deal with Saudi Arabia. And, you know, it also, we're talking about weapons, we're talking about nuclear materials, which are now the threat, right?
Sure.
It's no longer a nation engaging in war with another nation. It's about these materials getting into the wrong hands. So then why don't we focus on Pakistan more in that case? I feel like it's just a little misguided to act like Iran needs to be the center of attention.
2 points again. From a U.S. perspective only, we have our interest, and I've made that kind of clear with our troops that we have in Iraq. Agree with it or not, they're there. We have a lot of military in the region. Saudi Arabia is not a threat to our ally Israel. It's not a threat to our military bases. Their country allows us to be there and to help the government there fight off radicals. Second point would be that this is bringing the world together. And we have Russia canceling arms sales to Iran because of those sanctions. So maybe the first 3 rounds of sanctions didn't work. And I'm not even sure it's the UN sanctions on the 4th time that did. But the U.S. sanctions, if you go through them, and I think they could be tougher on a world stage. But if you want to do business with the United States of America, you can't do any military business with Iran anymore. And that's going to not only slow down their nuclear program, but they're not as protected. Without that system from Russia, they don't have the kind of range to protect against an airstrike anymore.
Okay, we really have like 20 seconds. Scott, do these things bring the world together or tear them apart?
Well, they tear them apart, and just like Iraq, it's all based on lies. The fact is, just on August 6th, the IAEA report said that they continue to verify the non-diversion of declared nuclear material in Iran to any military or other special purpose. They're not in violation of the NPT. Barack Obama is a liar. What they're in violation of are a bunch of illegitimate UN Security Council mandates that have no legitimacy whatsoever. In fact, are in
They do have
violation of the United
legitimacy
States signature to
All right,
respect
guys.
Iran's right to
This
civilian
is a
nuclear
junk that
deterrence.
I
IAEA
have to
said
wrap
this
it up,
week. They're here.
unfortunately. I know you guys could keep going forever, and we can call everyone liars, but that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you both very much for joining me, and
Thanks.
well, the debate rages on.